March seems so close to spring that you high-rolling risk-takers might go ahead and start planting warm-weather crops. But the frost-free date isn't until April 12th. I've seen a few Marches where we actually had snow. So, if you decide to go ahead and plant in March, I recommend having ready those floating row covers or blanket plant covers or something similar to help protect your crops if it suddenly gets cold again. They say March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb, which doesn't always apply, but it is common for early March to be rough, but late March to have less wind and more spring-like weather. The later you wait in March, the safer it is to plant. Here's a quick, non-relevant side note. Contrary to popular belief, the Bible has no verses about the lion and the lamb lying down together. Rather, the lamb's slumber partner is the wolf. The lion is hanging out with the yearling and calf and eating straw. Isaiah 11:6-9, Isaiah 65:25. This can be the month for pruning musadines and grapes. You want to prune them before they start putting out leaves, but hopefully after the hard freezes that might damage the cut ends. Since March is so unpredictable, they might start putting out leaves this month and you need to prune soon. Or there might be a freeze and you should wait. So all I can say is, may the odds be ever in your favor. March is a good time to start seeds indoors, and they probably won't get too big before they can be planted outdoors. Tomatoes are a popular choice to start indoors. My September gardening video has my favorite method of starting the tomato seeds, which I saved from my own tomatoes. Most seeds are fine and good to start indoors, but exceptions are radishes, beans, peas, corn, and carrots, as they don't transplant well. But carrots and most peas you could have started outside last month anyway, and debatably, radishes too. I often hang open Ziploc bags in the windows as an easy way to start a lot of seeds. Then I have to carefully separate them out when they are ready to transplant. This is only something to try when you have a lot of seeds, since not as many seedlings will survive being transplanted as they would if they were all in their own little cups. If you lack room for starting seeds in the house and don't have a greenhouse, you can make a bunch of miniature greenhouses out of jugs, like milk or water jugs, or use plastic Coke bottles. But I recommend starting them indoors or in a greenhouse if you can. When the plants are in a bunch of little jugs, it's harder to keep up with watering them and preventing them from getting mold if you overwater. And on warm days they can get too hot, and you might have to remove the tape to open them completely. Then close them again when it gets cooler. And these bottles aren't good enough for hard freezes, so you'd have to cover them with a blanket or bring them inside temporarily. But if you can keep up with it, it can work and is handy to learn to do, especially if you're a survivalist. There are several ways to make these. I'll share what I think is the easiest. You will need plastic jugs or bottles, preferably clear, something to cut them with. This could be a scalpel or an X-Acto knife. That's usually easiest. You can also use scissors or a knife, or just find something to cut it with. I think it's easiest to first stab it with the X-Acto knife, and when the slit is big enough, use scissors to finish cutting it. You're also going to need clear plastic tape, like packaging tape. You need something to put holes in the bottom. I like to use a wood burning pin or a soldering iron. I've heard of some people using hot glue guns. You can just use a drill, but the plastic might rip. Or you can just stab a hole through the bottom, because who cares if it's neat. You also need good potting mix, preferably with added perlite, to prevent compaction in the small area. I like to melt the holes in first with the lids on tightly, just because I'm slightly entertained by the air rushing out of the first hole. You can put these holes on the very bottom or a little up to have a shallow place to hold water. That cuts down on the need to add water, but could make them too wet. Then you cut off the top part of the bottle. How far up is not an exact science, just estimate. You don't cut it completely in half, but leave a small part so you can hinge it open and closed. Then put in the good potting soil. Then plant whatever seed or seeds. Add a little water. Then tape it back up with clear plastic tape. You can set these outside with the lids off to allow for airflow, and they are good to grow. But I recommend having them under some kind of cover. Yes, that will block some sunlight, but if they aren't covered, then first hard rain might fill them up with water faster than it can drain out and destroy the plants. An option would be to hang on to the lids and put them on before a big rain, or keep the lid on and drill more holes in the side for air hole, and hopefully the holes will be big enough for airflow without driving rain getting in. Like I said, having all these bottle greenhouses is much inferior to having a heated place in your home, but better than nothing. An option to doing all this is having clear plastic bottles with their bottom cut off to put over plants you planted in the ground. That can allow their roots to have more oxygen and better drainage, and you won't have to risk disturbing their roots to transplant them later. You just take a plastic bottle, like a Coke bottle, cut off the bottom, and put it over a young plant. You might leave the lid off to allow for airflow. On warmer days, try to remember to take them off and put them back on during the night or colder days. Otherwise, your plants might get too hot and die, and also mold can be an issue. The downside of this is you can't bring them in the house if it gets really cold. This month, let's celebrate that winter is almost over, but that it's still too early to worry about excessive heat.